Last week, South Africa hosted the 2016 International AIDS Conference, where it was acknowledged that although the government is successfully rolling out ARVs, sadly, South Africa has the highest number of new infections. Out of the country's population, young women between the ages of 15 and 24 have the highest infection rate, with most of these young people still of school-going age. David van Wyk, researcher at Benchmarks Foundation, has written out an article arguing that part of the problem is caused by South Africa's high cost of education. He joins us now in studio. David, welcome. It's quite a statement and a conclusion to come to. Talk to us about your logic behind all of that.
Well, I think that if we consider that the National Student Fund loans to students comes to about between 2,000 and 20,000 per year, and you look at accommodation in the Brixton area, for example, where UJ and Wit students go, you find that accommodation ranges anything from 1,000 to 3,000 rands per month. Yeah. That can be as much as 34,000 rands a year. Now, if your student loan only covers 20,000, your accommodation is not covered. You know, I don't think that you will find an academic book in the shops these days that's under 250 rands a book. You know, so that would add to the bill that the students face. And if you look at food inflation, the price of mielie meal year on year went up by 21.2%. The price of samp went up by 36.2%. Cooking oil 38.8%, and potatoes 120%.
Sure.
Now, many of these students that live in suburban accommodation find themselves in a situation where they either starve or they sell themselves for sex. And you will know that the age group 15 to 25-year-old, it's young women. You know, the infection levels for young women in this age group is 4 times higher than that of men in the same group.
So it's 4 times higher than that of men. And then when we've got a graphic up on the screen right now. I mean, and I think this is alarming. I mean, the bells should be going so loud at the moment. I mean, 2,363 cases that occur in new infections occurring per week. The next highest is in Uganda at 570. I mean, this is unbelievable where we're sitting.
Well, I think, yes. I think that the situation in South Africa is very complex because of the economy that we have. We have in the mining areas where we work as Benchmarks Foundation, migrant labor, and migrant labor is a major contributor to sex amongst young women in areas where local people find very little employment, in a situation where there is actually big job creators. So you would find, for example, an Anglo or a Lonmin mining operation in the Rustenburg area would employ as many as 30 to 40,000 people, but most of those people would come from outside. And so the local people resort to survival strategies that includes sex work, sex work or shebeens or selling food and so on to mine workers. And here, in studies that we have done in the Rustenburg area, we have found that mothers have rented out their daughters to mine workers for 2,000-3,000 rands a month. This mine worker would have access to that daughter for that kind of money. So I think that we need to really relook at the structure of the South African economy, the employment situation in the South African economy, and of course, in terms of education and at our universities, because you will see the same spike coming through to your universities and colleges and so on, and you don't want to see the cream of the crop of the country that managed to get into universities also succumbing to the spike in the infection rates.
Yeah. On the screen we had a little bit earlier the talk about blessers, and I know this has been a massive conversation, but you wrote that a blesser's response to criticism was that the struggle with bursaries and scholarships has always been there during apartheid, but the generation did not resort to prostitution and sex. He implies that you are absolving young people from taking responsibility for the choices they make.
Well, I think that the problem with that response is to blame the victim.
Yeah,
and I think that really the response should be, why are responsible men who are high income earners, and we see them all over Brixton and Yeoville and Melville and these suburbs that are close to the to the universities. They are driving around and picking up girls all the time. You know, the moral responsibility is with them because they have families and they have a high level of income and they should know better. You know, the basic argument there is that men can't think and that men are just driven by their sexual drive.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the old argument of a person was raped because they wanted to be raped. You know, it's completely unacceptable.
And which is unacceptable in this day and age. It really is unacceptable. I just want to get back to and sort of round off our discussion because at the end of the day, it was the statement about education, and it's not only paying for your education. I mean, it's even the accommodation, the textbooks, which you did mention as well. I know that in one of the things, I mean, in Brixton, around the area, I think that's where you stay. You say that rent can be as high as just 3,000 rand for a room, and that's on top of everything else. So, you know, to try and find money in any way you can to try and get an education is what is ultimately killing these young girls.
Well, if you look at the South African income levels, COSATU has found that perhaps 50% of South Africans earn less than 6,000 rands per month. You know, these are the parents of these students. So they get the loans, they get the government assistance for students, but the problem is they do not get the money for food, the money for accommodation, the money for books, you know. And look, it's not just also a racial thing. I have a stepdaughter in Bloemfontein, and a blesser tried to pick her up in the street, and it was a white guy in a 4x4 while she was walking to the university. She's black, you know. So the question is, what is wrong with these men with the money, not with the students? The students are trying to survive, you know. And at the same time, also our education system. We had Fees Must Fall a year ago, and we had the big marches, and students. You know, I took photographs during those marches and so on. And students, in their placards and their posters and so on, raised the issues that confront them very, very boldly. We've had a commission of inquiry, but we've had no action on the issue, except to say fees won't rise for this year.
Exactly, and now we're expecting them to rise next year.
Yes,
and we're seeing another fire underneath fees.
So we wait for the explosion before we respond. We are rather reactive than proactive with these issues.
Yeah, we have to leave it there, unfortunately, but I got a feeling it's not the end of this conversation. David van Wyk is a researcher with Benchmarks Foundation, talking about the cost of education and its link to the high number of HIV positive young girls in South Africa between the ages of 15 and 24, the highest in the world, in fact. And Blessers is just one part of it. And I know that our Minister Aaron Motsoaledi looked at 3 billion rand at a program to help and keep these Blessers away from these young girls. And that's something I know he feels very, very passionately about. David, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again for being with us. Let's take a break. We've got more after this. Stay tuned.